All right, good morning. Welcome to, it's Wednesday already. Wednesday. So just wanted to remind you, don't forget that Monday's a holiday, so you don't need to come into school. You can if you want, I guess, but you'll be very lonely and sad. What?
Because of Thanksgiving.
Because of Thanksgiving. It's a holiday. We can be thankful at least for the holiday, maybe more. So don't come in on Monday. We'll start again on Tuesday. I would like to do a quiz on Tuesday if I could.
Tomorrow?
No. On Tuesday. Yeah, not Thursday.
Next Tuesday?
This coming Tuesday, right? I'd like to do a quiz because we need to do 5 quizzes in this class, and I think we're a little bit behind because we're already in week 5. So I'd like to do it on Tuesday, same as we, did last time. I'll post it in Microsoft Teams, the classes that are included. It'll probably be something like 9 to 16 or whatever, depending on where a good place to cut it off is, but I'll confirm that for you later. So Tuesday we'll do a quiz. Yeah. Does anyone have anything that they want to say or ask, or before we dive into ancient Egypt again? No? You're good?
Yeah.
Good? Okay. Yes. So yesterday we finished up watching part of our video. I think we may watch the other half of it as well. I think it's okay, right?
25 minutes?
Yeah, we've got another 25 minutes to go. We won't watch it now, but I think we may come back to it. I think it's pretty interesting. And as we saw a little bit of, Kar and Merit, right? So we were able to see some elements of Egyptian culture, but we're also able to see how we know what we know, right? And part of it is based on archaeological remains, part of it is based on writing, part of it is kind of imagining, right? Trying to understand and imagine what people's lives were like. And I don't know about you, would you say that based on what we saw, would you say that you kind of you could imagine what the lives of those two were like? Kar and Merit? Yeah, I think we got some kind of an idea, right? You have to do some imagining, but I think we could probably imagine what their lives were like thousands of years ago, right? So yeah, we saw a little bit about where they lived and where they cooked and where they kept their drinks cold. We kind of saw some of their belongings, right? Their, Merit's sort of dressing table and her cosmetics and things like that. We saw their belongings, right? Beds and furniture and all kinds of things. And we saw a little bit about what was happening in the Valley of the Kings, right? Where they were burying pharaohs. And we'll come back to that later because mummification is not a super common way of disposing of the dead. Other cultures do mummify their dead, but I think ancient Egypt is probably the most famous example of this sort of funerary custom, if you will. So we will come back to it and talk about it a little more, but connected to that, of course, is the idea of religion, right? And religion's a critical part of culture. All cultures have some sort of religion or spiritual practice, right? And again, this is what religion is. And again, if you're a religious person and you have beliefs, I'll just ask that you kind of put them aside, and we're just kind of dealing with religion as an anthropologist would, right? So I'm not questioning anyone's belief, but anthropologists look at religion as something that humans create, right? And they create it for a purpose. And that purpose here again is to meet certain needs of the people, serve as a method of social control, and kind of give people some sort of common collective experience, right? We said that there were 5 characteristics of religion, and we'll need these a little bit later today because I have an assignment for you to do. But I'll review them for you quickly here. So whatever religion you're talking about, it has some sort of belief in a supernatural power, right? And so it could be God, it could be Allah, it could be Vishnu and Shiva. It could be Marduk. It could be the Force, as in Star Wars. They have the Force, right? Some sort of supernatural power. And there are people that can interact with that power. Sometimes they're priests or rabbis or gurus or shamans or Jedi Knights or whatever it is. There are people who know how to deal with this supernatural power, right? All religions have them, even though they're a little bit different. We call them different things, but every religion has these people. The belief system in a religion is usually legitimized or supported by mythical stories, right? So the mythical stories help to explain why the world is the way it is. The gods are kind of characters in these stories. And the more stories you hear, the more it helps to support the belief system, right? They're evidence that the belief system is true. And so here are some characters. I think these are some characters from the sort of traditional mythology of the Philippines, I think, is where these characters are from, I think. The third one here is that religion kind of reduces people's anxiety, right? We said there's questions that humans just don't have the answers to, right? What happens when you die? How was the world created, right? What is the purpose? What is the meaning of life? What is its purpose? We don't know the answers to these things, but religion helps to give us an answer, right? It helps to give us an explanation, and that's kind of comforting, right? It's comforting to know what happens after you die, right? It's comforting to know where the universe came from and how we were created and what is the point of all of this, right? That's comforting to know. Again, religion is usually connected to the power structure of a society, okay? So leaders will sometimes legitimize their rule based on the gods, right? Why are you the king? Well, because the gods made me king, right? The gods showed me favor or blessed me in this certain way, right? But it also allows leaders to transfer their decision-making ability to someone else, right? Why did you do that thing you did? The gods told me, the gods commanded me to do it, and so I did, right? And then if it all goes wrong, you can blame the god and say, well, maybe the god told us the wrong thing, right? And finally, you can say that religion serves as a mechanism of social control, right? Most, probably all actually, all religious systems have some sort of moral code. They have some sort of way you should behave, right? What's right and what's wrong? What's good and what's bad? How do you live in a life in alignment with the Tao, right? Or with the Force, or with Dharma, right?
They said that they got flown from his soul to us.
Say that one more time.
Is that they said? I hear that they said they got blown from his soul to us, this, something like this. Because of that, we are like a king. We are different than other people.
Yeah. Well, I guess that almost has to do more with this one, right? The idea of why are we as we are? How were we created?
No. They say they got a blown, professional soul from his body, from God body. It means that God is like a body.
Okay.
And he blown his soul to us like this.
Ah, okay. So, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's kind of interesting too, right? And it's another way of thinking about, what humans are.
Some stupid things say this, but
Yeah, well, it legitimizes power, right? Or it explains why the world is the way it is. Right? All of these religions very useful for doing that. And for, again, establishing a means of social control, right? Good things and bad things. Sometimes there's rewards and punishments associated with those, sometimes not. But religion's very good for that as well, right? And so religions kind of do all of these things, and they serve a purpose for the societies that have them. And again, if you have certain religious beliefs, I'm not really talking about that, but I am talking about, the Egyptians created a religion for all of these reasons, right? It served as a method of social control. It explained things. It legitimized their authority, right? There were priests of all of the different gods who, did the appropriate rituals and gave the appropriate sacrifices so that the gods would be happy with them, right? All of these things are...
It's the government trick, I think. Because if we order to people that you have to do this, maybe someone will don't obey us. But if we put, if we give our ideas to them as a behaviors or they got as a religion,
Yeah.
they will obey.
Sure, yeah. Laws are much more powerful when they come from God, right? If Justin Trudeau says, don't kill anybody, it's like, okay, fine, Justin, whatever you say, right? But if God Almighty himself says, thou shalt not kill, that's different, right? you don't mess with the man upstairs, right? And so yeah, they're much more powerful, right? Those laws and sort of religious morality is much stronger, right? Because the authority is much stronger, right? It's the guy upstairs. Yeah, so Egyptians here, we said, were polytheistic. They had multiple gods that we met them yesterday, right? And I want to talk a little bit today about the Egyptian pantheon, okay? So again, a pantheon is a family of gods, and often there are stories to explain where the gods came from, how they came into existence, why are they here or up there or wherever they are, and why are they like the way that they're like. So we met a few of these characters yesterday. Osiris, we said, the god of the underworld, and the husband of his sister Isis. Right? But still, the husband of his sister Isis. We see him holding or having symbols of being a king, right? He's got the crown of Upper Egypt, and he's got the little whip and the crook, right? Those are symbols of kingship, of being pharaoh. And again, he's married to Isis, this sort of female protector god, if you will. Also his sister. We met Horus, and Horus is the son of Osiris and Isis. He's a very heroic figure. He's got the head of a falcon, as you can see. He's often
Like a fish?
no, like a bird, like a hawk kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, he's got a hawk. You can't see because it's kind of dark, but yeah, he's got the head of a.
yeah, because the background is like dark.
Yeah, he's got the head of a falcon, is what he is. Sometimes he's even shown as a falcon. But he's kind of associated with the pharaoh on Earth, and you'll kind of see why in a second. And then we've got Set, right? And so Set is the brother of Osiris and Isis. He's married to his sister Nephthys, and again, he's kind of a bad guy, depending on what myth you read. Sometimes he's a god of chaos and the wind and the desert. Sometimes he's, this just evil character. You'll see why in a minute. And he's kind of this strange animal. We're not really sure. He's kind of an anteater or an aardvark kind of thing. He's got these really square ears, which are bizarre. He's just an odd creature, Set is. Right. So that brings us to this. So Mike Rugnetta here is going to talk us through pantheons, and he's going to talk about Egypt, but he's also going to talk about the Sumerians a little bit too. So we get kind of a bonus in this video. It's a 2-for-1. So he'll talk a little bit about Sumeria, and then he'll talk about the Egyptian pantheon and the sort of story of Osiris and Isis and Set and Horus, because it's a very popular story in ancient Egypt. Okay? So for online people, I think it's just Kayla there, but for Kayla, The questions and the link is in Microsoft Teams, as it usually is. And the questions I want you to pay attention to are these. Okay? So Mike will talk about what is the purpose of the gods. So why do human beings invent gods in the first place? Right? And yeah, why do people imagine divine characters? Okay? Second one, there's kind of an interesting detail about the Sumerian pantheon that Mike will point out. And, what can we learn about Sumerian history or culture from that interesting detail? They'll talk about the first of all the Egyptian gods, the main one. Number 4 is almost an answer to that question, unfortunately. But how do we know the sun is seen as important to the religion of ancient Egypt? And then the story of Osiris, okay? How does it explain the need for mummification? So, a few questions. The questions are in Microsoft Teams. Kayla, I'll just turn you loose to go and look at that, and then we'll come back and answer the questions. Okay? So, see you shortly. Link is in Microsoft Teams.
Hey there, I'm
All right, very interesting. So, this is first question is what he talks about at the very beginning of the video, and it's a little bit complicated, but what does he say is the purpose of the gods? What's that? Okay, so yeah, they're personifications, right? They're metaphors of things that people cannot explain, right? We don't know what the rain is. We don't know why there's thunder and lightning in the sky. How do we explain it? We personify it, right? We make it into a person, right? And that's much easier for people to understand. Right? Why else do people create gods? What's their purpose? Okay, so, well, actually, that's a good point. That's similar to what Vittoria said, but maybe to have some sense of control, right? If you don't know why it rains and why there's thunder and lightning, A, that's kind of scary not knowing, but B, you also have no control over it, right? But if you imagine it to be a god that is responsible, well, then maybe you have some control, right? Maybe you can pray to the god, right? Or give offerings to the god. And then maybe the god will not, flood your farm or strike you with lightning or something like that. So yeah, not only does it help explain things, but it also gives you a way to control it, right? There's something you can do to influence these larger natural processes, right? That you wouldn't be able to in another way. That's a good point. Why else? Why else do people create gods?
Can you say like that? They thought that the gods come from another world and they can give advice to us to like how to agriculture and like how to they give ways to us to how to like set your lifestyle, something like that. I think.
Yeah, that's not something he says, but it's worth saying, right? The idea that it comes up with Osiris, and it came up with, oh shoot, what was the name? What was the fish? The fish god in Sumeria that came ashore and taught people how to farm? What was his name? Oh no, Awanis. Remember Awanis? He was the fish with the guy's torso sticking out of the top. Awanis came to teach people all of the skills of civilization, right? Agriculture and building and carpentry and all that stuff. And here Osiris does the same thing, right? Osiris comes and teaches people how to build and how to do all of these crafts, right? And special things. And again, it answers that question, how do we know how to do all this stuff, right? Where does this knowledge come from? It comes from the gods, right? Here it comes from Osiris. For the Sumerians, it came from Awanis, right? But lots of myths and religions have this idea of, things that humans have is brought from the gods, right? Or is given from the gods. They said something too about death and decay. Did you catch that? Yeah, so we know that everyone will die eventually. Sorry, this is a real downer. We know that everyone will die eventually, right? That's just, we know that that's just true of humans, right? Everyone dies. But that's kind of a scary thought, and lots of religions have the idea that somehow you will continue on, right? You will be reincarnated, or you will enter heaven or paradise or whatever, or Valhalla, whatever it's called. There will be some part of you is actually immortal, right? When you die, there is some part of you that will not, right? Some part of you will continue on. Your soul, your spirit, your ka, I forget what they call it in India, something will continue on. But for that to happen, you almost need to have something else that is divine, right? And so the gods kind of help do that as well. There are these figures that prove that immortality is possible, right? They prove to us that it is possible for things not to die, right? Because the gods are eternal, right? They live forever and ever and ever, right? And so if we want to have a chance to do that, we kind of need someone else to be able to do it first, if you will. And so here the gods are kind of a model, right? They're a promise that some kind of immortality is possible because the gods can do it. And if the gods can do it, maybe humans can too, in a way, right? Maybe our souls are immortal, or our spirit, or whatever you want to call it. What's so interesting about these characters of the Sumerian pantheon? Yeah. Yeah, lots of gods, and kind of like the big pieces of the environment, right? The earth, the sky, the waters, right? Those things are all kind of represented as gods. What else is interesting about that Sumerian pantheon? What's that?
Incest.
There's a lot of incest, yeah. Again, keep in mind though, in a lot of those creation stories, those gods are the only people that exist for a while. So I mean, if you're going to get married, you kind of have to marry your brother or sister because nobody else exists. It's still gross, but that's how these stories usually work. It had something to do with the sheep god.
Can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
The Pantheon is like a place that gods live there.
In this context, it means like a family of gods. Sometimes there's like in Rome, there's an actual building called the Pantheon. And so it kind of serves the same purpose as like as a place for all of the gods. And so like in ancient Rome, it's an actual building. Here it's like it's a term that describes the family of the gods themselves. So you can use the word differently.
Yeah, I like searching, and now I'm searching the internet, and
Yeah.
it shows a place like
Big kind of dome
like
thing?
that, yeah.
Yeah.
And in the movie, you said that the place, the gods in the Pantheon, and I think that I thought that it means that a place that God lives in there.
Yeah, well, the term can be used in a few ways, right? And I think it's connected to I think it might be the Greek. Pan is sort of a Greek for like all things, right? If you're pansexual, then you're interested in all genders, right? So pan, and then theon or theos is God, right? So you've got this word that's kind of like all the gods, pantheos. And so here, yeah, you can use it to represent a building or a place, but you can also use it to represent, an idea that there's this collection of gods, right? So, yeah, what about the sheep god, though? What's interesting about that? And they what?
He married the goddess. It's like a bull.
Oh yeah, somebody married. Oh yeah, yeah. So the sheep god and another god got together, and then they gave birth to. No, the bull is married to someone else.
Yeah, but there's
Yeah, or no, it's shoot. How did it go? It doesn't so much have to do with who married who, but it's the fact that they have a sheep god at all. Why do you think they have a sheep god? Agriculture? Well, no, that's kind of what Mike's pointing out, is that most societies that are heavily agricultural, they have a god of agriculture, right? So Osiris is a god of agriculture, right? I think Hathor is a little bit too. In ancient Greece, you've got Demeter, right? Demeter is the goddess of the harvest, of grain, of farming. But here, even though the Sumerians were farmers, we have a sheep god. Why is that? Said it really quick, but
Maybe it's to remind them that once when they were still trying to herd the animals.
yeah, right. It kind of lets us know that that there was probably a time before when they weren't farmers, when they were herding animals, when they were herding sheep, and so at that time they created a sheep god, right? A god of the sheep, and since then their culture has kind of changed. They've changed their subsistence strategy. They're starting to farm, but the sheep god still exists, right? Gods don't go away very quickly, and they still actually had it, right? Even though their culture had changed and they'd moved on to farming, they still had this sheep god that kind of recalls an earlier time, right? A time when they were herding sheep rather than farming, right? Very interesting.
We have a word like it's have a P. I think in the first first word,
Uh-huh.
but it means that how to ranch and how to
Yeah, pastoralism.
pastoralism.
Yeah. So kind of indicates that the Sumerians might have been pastoralists before they were farmers, right? And lots of people in that part of the world continued to have sheep afterwards, right? They continued to be pastoralists. Yeah, very good. First of all the Egyptian gods, who is he?
No.
The head dude.
Osiris.
I think none.
Nope.
None is the first one.
Nope. Well, first, but I don't mean the first one on the scene, but the most important one. Who is it?
Isis and
Nope.
Osiris is married to each other, yeah?
They're married to each other.
Yeah, I think.
Their child?
They're important. Horus?
Horus?
Not Horus. No?
It was Ra, right?
Yeah, it was Ra or Amun Ra or Amun, depends on where you are and who they call him. He's the sun god, right? He's the one who's most important.
You mean it, but?
Huh? Nope. Ra. Ra is again, not the first one ever created, but the most important one.
Because
Right?
here was the first of all the Egyptian gods.
He's
Means that you said that it means that the important god.
Yeah, Ra is kind of, he's the most important one. He's the one that the Egyptians kind of look to first, right? And there's lots of other gods that are, for more specialized things, but Ra is kind of the main god. Or Amun Ra, however you want to call him. He's the main one. And you often see, you'll see him depicted as a disc kind of thing. You'll see the sun. Sometimes you'll see sun's rays coming down, and you'll see that that's sort of a personification of Ra, this main god, or Amun Ra.
What did he do?
He's the sun god. He's also seen as kind of a creator, the creative eye. So, he's kind of up there in the sky. He is the sun, but he's also more than that. He's kind of an overseer of everything, right? So,
Means that the other gods come from him.
in a way they do, yeah. In a way they do. I'm going to change this to question number 4 a little bit. Why do you think the sun god was so important to Egyptians? Why is he so important? Or why is the sun so important?
Because the sun is the first thing that we can be alive with the sun.
It's the first. I'm a little confused. Can you say that in a slightly different way?
Human cannot be alive without the sun.
Sure. Right? The sun is
All of the
Ro-
plants
And
grow
like
for
for
sun.
agriculture, the plants should be like photosynthesis. Is it true?
Yeah.
The word photosynthesis?
Yeah.
And they need sun, and like the people to go live,
Yeah.
they should be like eat something like plants and
Yeah, it's an energy source, right?
Yeah.
We know that without the sun, the plants would die, right? Without the sun, we would die, right? And it would also be a very dark, gloomy place.
What about the goddess of the moon?
Of the moon?
Yeah.
Who is it for ancient Egypt? What's her name? Shoot, can't remember. Moon is usually less important,
I mean
but
the god of the moon.
yeah.
Why is it less important? I mean, like, basically, sun and moon. What is
Sorry, I'm missing your question. What?
Goddess of the moon, like, I'm asking, like, they worship, like, the god of the sun is, like, the most important. And what about the moon?
Yeah, well, I think the moon usually has a god, but I think that for the most part, you know, the people recognize that the sun is more important. Or would you say that? I don't know. What's the moon good for?
Maybe you can see the moon every night.
You can't see it every night.
Sometimes you also cannot see the sun.
You can't see all of it.
Even if
That's
it's-
Egypt.
if
The
it's
moon
cloudy,
give
you
light
cannot
at
see
night.
Egypt, come on.
Well, what?
The moonlight give light in the night.
Yeah. Okay. So moon gives some light at night. Right. Moon has the moon's gravity has an effect on the tide, right?
Shows that like the world is continuing to the correctly.
It's
Meaning that the like sun come down and the moon come up.
Oh, okay.
And like the life is continuing.
Yeah, I guess so, right? There's this continuous sort of light, and the moon has its own cycle that's separate from.
It means Honsu. Honsu is something.
Oh,
like that.
Hansu,
Yeah,
yes,
it's-
right. Yeah. What kind of head does Hansu have? Does he have a hawk too?
What?
Does he have a hawk or a falcon for a head?
Yeah, it's like something like ball.
Oh, he's just a.
It's a
he's-
hot, yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh yeah. There he is. Okay, yeah, he's sort of a hawk with a ball on his head. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the sun is more important than the moon, isn't it? Don't know. I'm not sure that ancient people had determined that the moon was responsible for tidal differences. Maybe they had, but I don't know for sure. I know we know it, but I don't know if they knew it. The moon was certainly used for calendar, right? Most people recognize that there are 12 lunar
Yeah.
months in a year.
When the moon is complete, you can say like the 30 day of month is finished.
Yeah.
Like in the past, like the like humans when they want to go to war, they know that from moon that when like they say when the moon complete, we can like attack to this country, something like that.
Yeah. It's
It
a.
can help
it-
them with the calendar.
Yeah, the moon's a good timing device, right? The moon's a good timing device. There's also often there's a connection between women's menstrual cycles and the cycles of the moon. Those things are they're not, no, I don't mean like scientifically, but I mean people would sort of metaphorically combine those two things. I know it doesn't work that way. But sometimes people would talk about, a woman's moon because it was a similar kind of 28-day cycle. And so sometimes the moon metaphor was used to describe that process. Yeah, I know it doesn't work that way. Yeah, so there's definitely moon gods or goddesses for sure, right? Because it's a pretty obvious thing in the night sky. But I think most cultures would say the sun is more important, and I think I would agree with them. If I had to do without the sun or the moon, I'd tell the moon to get lost.
You thought that like the moon is important then?
I think it's important, but if I had to choose between the sun and the moon, I would Get rid of the moon. Okay, last story. How does the story of, or last question, how does the story of Osiris help explain the mummification ritual?
Oh, because of the one of the version of the story that the Osiris body got separated and he was revived by the god and by Isis power, I think he revived, and people see it as like if they did the same thing as what the god did,
Yeah.
that people will live immortally in the other life.
Yeah, so that thing they were saying at the beginning of the video, that, you know, the gods serve as kind of a metaphor or a legitimization for immortality, right? For living forever. And here in the story, that's exactly what happens to Osiris, right? Osiris is murdered by his brother, cut into pieces and cast away, and they reassemble him, but they bring him back to life with this certain ritual, right? And Anubis comes down and helps Isis and Horus kind of put his body back together again, and they wrap him. They do certain rituals and say certain spells and things like that, and that allows him to revive, right? And so that's the same kind of ritual that people do when they mummify humans, right? They assume, they know that, you know, they feel Anubis is there with them, right, with the priests, and they do the same thing so that that person can live again in paradise, right? So it kind of explains the need for that process and explains how and why it works, right? Does that story sound familiar at all to you? Like, you've got the king, right? And then the king's younger brother, and the king's younger brother is jealous, so he murders the king. But then later, the son of the king comes back, defeats his evil uncle, and reclaims the throne for his father. What's that? What is it? Oh, that's Macbeth?
I don't know.
And we have a lot of stories like this in our historical country.
Yeah.
That like the uncle killed her brother, like murdered her brother.
Yeah.
And his son come and murdered him.
Yeah.
And it's like continue like this.
Yeah, right? This is what's interesting too, again, like, there's the hero's journey story, which is, there's lots of stories like it. And there's lots of stories like this as well, right? Where the evil uncle kills his brother and steals the throne, and then the son of the king is kind of raised in secret, right? He becomes a man, and then he returns and defeats his uncle, right?
And like some of them, like the brothers kill each other.
Yeah, sometimes.
To gain the throne.
Yeah,
And
sometimes.
Because of that, like the kings like to have more than 3 or 5 sons.
Yeah.
Because
Just
they
in
have-
case.
They
Yeah.
know that some of them are going to murder.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a popular story though, right? You've heard it a bunch of times with different details, but it's interesting. It's the same one, right? When I kind of hear this story, I think about the Lion King, right? Because is that not the same story? Yeah, same story, right? Different characters. They're lions, of course, not humans or gods, but it's the same story, right? So it's kind of interesting how some of these myths and stories have similar beats, right? The details and the characters are different, but it's the same kind of structure, right? That people kind of tell these stories over and over again, but tell them in ways that are kind of culturally significant, right? And make sense to them. And there's no incest in The Lion King, which is
This is all like
refreshing.
Her uncle killed. Yeah, it's not like this. Yeah.
Uh,
This story I remember. that
This one,
it's
or?
It's the uncle like killed his brother and the young son. Like in private, make her like man, and then
Mm-hmm.
come and get him.
Yep. There's This actually happens too in ancient Greek mythology, and it's actually who is it? I think it's Kronos, but Kronos is a king who he eats all of his children because he's scared that they'll kill him and take the throne, sort of thing. So he eats them all, but his wife, whose name I can't remember, she hides away one of the children, Zeus, until he becomes a man, and then Zeus returns, kills Kronos, and releases all of his brothers and sisters. And so, yeah, that's a kind of a similar sort of story, right? But it happens, over and over and over again in lots of different cultures. And yeah, even in our culture here, with something, as silly as the lion, not silly, but a simple story like the Lion King, we have the same kind of beats, right? We have the same kind of story structure. Really interesting.
A lion is like metaphor of king from animal. Yeah, is it true?
Very true, right? And that's lions are associated with power and kingship in a lot of cultures, right? In ancient Persia, definitely. In the UK, definitely. Actually, I think in a lot of cultures, the lion is
The king of the animal, the king of the jungle.
the king of the jungle. Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Okay, good people. You want to take a little break?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about religion, and I have something for you to do. Okay. Okay. And we are back. So, I have a little assignment for you to do, okay? Little assignment. And this is what I would like you, I'm actually just going to post it in Microsoft Teams here or assign it in Microsoft Teams, but I'll walk you through it. It's reasonably simple, reasonably. What I would like you to do is this. I'd like you to do a little bit of research, okay, into a world religion or into another culture. It can be an ancient culture, can be a modern culture, as long as it's not your own culture, okay? So I actually want you to do some research. I don't want to hear about your culture right now. I want you to research another one, okay? And what I would like you to do, is to figure out how those 5 characteristics of religion that we talked about, how they kind of show up in that particular religion or in that particular culture, okay? So, what's that? I can't hear you.
Continue first. You can continue first.
Okay, so for example, the first characteristic of religion was that there are supernatural beings, right? And there are people who can interact with them, right? And so if I was using, although you shouldn't because it's not real, but just as an example, if we were using Star Wars as an example, we would say, well, in Star Wars mythology, the supernatural power is the Force, right? There's this energy thing that sort of exists in all people and all things. It binds the universe together. And there are people who can interact with this Force, right? There are Jedi Knights who know how to use the Force and be at one with the Force, right? And there's also Sith Lords, right, who are kind of bad guys, and they know how to kind of manipulate this power as well, right? So if I was doing that, I would say just that. The first characteristic of religion says there's supernatural powers and there's people who know how to interact with it. In Star Wars, there is a force and energy that binds the universe together, and there are Jedi and Sith that both know how to interact with this supernatural force or manipulate it, right? Does that make sense? So I want you to do that for all 5 of those characteristics, okay? So the characteristic will be, you'll say what the characteristic is, and then how we see it in this particular religion, okay? The other thing I would like you to do is maybe stay away from the big 3 world religions if you wouldn't mind. So don't choose Christianity, don't use Islam, and don't use, what's the third one? Judaism, probably? Yeah, let's steer away from those big 3, okay? Because I think almost everyone kind of knows those off the top of their head, even if you're not.
So we shouldn't write about Muslim or.
No, don't. So don't.
Catholics.
What about what? Catholics or Christians? So no Christians, no Jewish people, no Muslims, okay? Because it's too easy. It's too easy. What's that? Is what? Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said. Scientology. Yes. Well, actually, I don't think so, but for this exercise, it'll work.
Can we do the assignment as a group?
Yes, you can work in pairs, in 2s, not in 3s, but in 2s. Yes, so that's what I want you to do. No Christianity, no Judaism, no Islam. Nothing against those 3. They're just so popular that everybody knows them, and I want you to learn something new out of this. I don't want you to just tell me what you already know.
Can we write like the questions? Can we write it like 4 bullet points?
Yes.
Short ones, or
Yes, you can write it in kind of short point forms. If you look at the assignment, because I've put it into Microsoft Teams, you should see it come up. And let me just see. You'll see that I've got I've got all 5 of them listed, and then there's little point forms below it. So you can just kind of use the format I have to punch in what you want to punch in. That said, please try to use a good, credible source. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. If you're not quite sure what that means, you will find out. If you do know what that means, then please use a credible source. Secondly, make sure you paraphrase, okay? So I know it would be very easy to just copy and paste from the internet, but I can read the internet too. I want to see your own words, okay? So type things out and explain them to me in your own words. Don't just copy and paste them from the internet, or there will be consequences. And then the last thing I want you to do is list the source. So where did this information come from, okay? And I want you to list it in MLA format. If you know what that is, fantastic. If you don't know what it is, you can have a look at I provided a link in the assignment. You can go there and it'll tell you how to format your source so that other people can find it again, okay? So yeah, fairly simple assignment, little bit of research, a little bit of writing, and then you're good to go. Sound okay? Easy peasy, lemon squeezy? No. Yes. Due date? Like when is it due? It is due by tomorrow at midnight. But I'm going to give you some time to do it right now. So in theory, you can probably get most of it done today if you work together, okay? One last little recommendation or tip. An online encyclopedia is probably a good source for this. Not Wikipedia, that doesn't count. But if you go to Britannica Online or something like that, that's a good place to look for world cultures and world religions, okay? So.
In here, like, see these 5 points.
Yep.
And if we should like answer this or
Yeah.
write something about it.
Tell me how each characteristic of religion, how it shows up in that religion or culture that you're researching, okay?
We should research like which religion.
That's up to you. As long as it's not one of those big 3, and as long as it's not your own religion.
It means that now we should like to go to internet and find a new religion.
Correct.
And like read something about that religion and about that religion answer to this question.
Correct.
How many religions should we search for? Yeah.
How?
How many?
Just one. Just one.
Can we do research for our own religion?
Nope.
No.
You already know that. I want you to learn something new. I don't want you to just tell me what you already know. Taoism? Yeah. Okay. You're not Taoist? You're not? You don't follow, you don't attend to the Tao? What's that? Where are they from? Taoism comes from China. Yep. Do they have their own religion? I think so. I don't know if that's a Oh, okay. Yes.
What do you mean by like Buddhism?
Oh, right.
Buddhism?
Buddhism, yep.
Yeah, Buddhism or Buddhism.
You can use Buddhism, yeah.
It's like for India, yeah.
It starts in India, but then spreads. Yeah, Buddhism is okay.
You're like it's not a completely like information about Buddhism. Yeah? I should write like Buddhism. How to be a Buddhism?
No. Like how do we see those 5 characteristics of religion? How do we see them in Buddhism?
Like this part.
Yeah.
Like how we see the religion, say religious,
Yeah.
something like that in Buddhism.
Yeah. How does Buddhism do that? How how does it reduce people's anxiety
they-
by providing explanations for the unknown?
Like Buddhism, more time.
Yeah. Okay. Buddhism's a good one though.
Is Taoism and Buddhism kind of similar? Taoism and Buddhism.
They're the same.
Different.
They're from the same country, but their goal is different.
Yeah, they are.
Buddha is like to sacrifice yourself to save the world, and Christ is just you're looking for yourself.
Yeah, they have some similarity in the way they operate, but they're different. Yeah.
Taoism is more. And also, like if you have time to save people,
Sure.
Domingo is for yourself.
It is a big
Just save
religion,
people.
but I imagine most people are Are you a Hindu? Good stuff. Okay. Yes. It's in the assignment. Yeah. So how does whatever religion you choose, how does it do those things? One religion? Yeah. How does the religion you research, how does it do those five things? How does it do Like which one? Does it matter? Maybe just put, like type on this who it is. Okay, so maybe I'll say it. Hey good people, if you're working together, you can do actually probably the best, what you should do is just submit one, right? And just put both of your names on the form, okay? So that way I'll know who's who, okay? So just submit one version of it with both of your names typed in, and that'll be fine, okay? There'll be less confusion that way.
You like tomorrow night?
Say again?
The you is for tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night. Yes, yes please. Yeah.
Because the last like I said, I put it in PDF.
That's okay too. It's probably easier to just type it in there, but I can see both of them, so it's no problem, but it makes things easier for you. Oh, it's fine. Yeah, it's okay. So you don't have to do something different. Don't work on it. Better to do what?
Which one is better to get like this way, work to pay or work science?
It's up to you. It's easier. It's probably easier if you work in pairs. If you want to do it alone, that's okay too. It's your choice. I just give the option because some people like to work in pairs and some people are kind of lone wolves. Either way. Lone wolf. Is that a faith you belong to? Okay. Sure. Yep, I'm good with it. It's interesting because I would have, wouldn't there be a huge number of traditional faiths across Africa?
Oh, sorry.
It's not explained.
There was maybe
Yeah. wonder if before that, before Christianity, was there kind of a sense of a traditional African belief system, or is it just we're not really sure what it was?
Yeah, there was no religion, and like they lived in many
Really? Okay, I'd like to hear about that. I just want to look at the mask. That mask looks like
Yeah, but I go with it, and it's not only about Nigeria.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that. Oh, a group of three. No, two is fine. Yeah, this is an easy one. So you don't need two people for this. That's too much. That's too much brain power for this. Two brains, maybe. One brain, sure. Works harder. Honda? Do we know anything about the religion of Wakanda?
Is it a religion?
Well, it's a country. It's a
Well,
fictional country.
Yeah, it's a fictional, but there is a belief.
Fictional ethnicity.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a religion in Wakanda. There's traditions.
We cannot use big tree.
I think that a fictional one would be okay if there was more to it, but I think in Wakanda, like I don't think that the Marvel has developed the religion enough for us to know. But like it's got like we hear a little bit about like this sort of
Oh,
spiritual.
there is.
Okay, well it's okay. Let's see. Let's see if there's enough. That's the question, right? Is there I don't know that there's enough there. You can read through it and see if you feel that there's enough information to confidently
So
do this.
we can use fictional religion.
If it is enough information.
If there's enough
So
information.
it should not be in real.
Well,
It should not be.
I don't think it has to be. I don't think it has to be.
Not just religion, it's a mutual.
Because if you ask an anthropologist about religions, anthropologists will say they're all made up.
Yeah, they're all like even
So if you
fiction,
make up a
even
fictional
it's all
one or a real
religion.
one,
The same thing.
They're the same thing. That's basic.
But
The main
again,
thing.
it has to be developed enough,
Yeah.
you know, for you to talk about, right? So there may be enough there, or there may not.
Do you want to try? Sure.
Yeah, I would, don't do the first. Good. Not so much how many, just kind of answer that question as best you can. Right? So, again, for that first question, that first part of the question, if we were doing Christianity, we would say there's a supernatural power, right? Christians think that there's a one God up in heaven. Sometimes he's manifested as Jesus or a Holy Spirit. Sometimes they're just talking about God. And there are priests, right? There are Christian priests who know how to pray and talk to God and, figure out the will of God. Yeah. So that, if it was Christianity, that would be an answer. Well, these are the main things. If you want to add in a little bit more, I'm happy to hear about it.
Oh, do we need to put the video to support it?
What's that?
Video to support it.
Videos? Well, I guess if you, yeah, I mean, if that's a source, then you can list it as a source, right? And I'm very curious to see how this You are? Wow. What's today? Yeah, but what, there's a one person who Nope, don't do that. But Hindus and Buddhists would be fine. What was it, James? We'll talk a little bit more about Jainism later in the course. They're from India as well. Not a huge group of people, kind of small, but
It's yes.
Yeah, this is what we need.
That is what characteristic of it.
Okay, good people. So we're out of time. I'll give you a little time to work on this tomorrow, and then we'll carry on. Okay? So it'll be due tomorrow night. So again, I'll give you a little bit more time tomorrow to finish, and then we'll kind of move on. But until then, have a great afternoon. Enjoy yourself. We'll see you tomorrow. Okay? All right.
I read
Thank you, sir.